Hello.
Hi, welcome, Nancy. Good to see you. Hi, Lori. Hi, Diane. Hi, Laura. Good to see all of you. Hope you all had an amazing week. I hope this is changing your lives, making it so much better. It's definitely been fun to be in this kind of like research phase, it feels like. I get to like learn stuff and then go around and like look at half the population going, oh, what stage are they in? Oh, what's going on with them? Or talk to them about it. It's so fun. So good. Okay. Anyone want to share any breakthroughs or any like anything that came up this week around studying the work? Yeah, Nancy.
Well, I thought it was interesting that Claudia asked Karen to think about the men that she admired during the week, to look at all the men and find out which one she admired, and she couldn't come up with one. That's pretty bad. I mean, that's how life is, though. Yeah.
Well, I think it's the way life is because we find what we're looking for. You know, like when I was trained to look for how men are jerks, I saw a lot of men being jerks, you know? And when I was
Uh,
looking for ways that they were lazy, I would see them in that lens. It was just so interesting to see like how we put these different glasses on and we can put other glasses on. Like even my experience of kings is so different because before it would be like, oh, he's so opinionated or he's always like telling people what he thinks. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, he's sharing like his life's work. This is his life's work. Like he has worked all his entire life to figure out what he believes about these things, and he's wanting to share those with me. And it's just such a different experience, you know? So
yeah,
yeah.
a way to understand what's going on. Yeah,
Oh my gosh, it's so liberating, you know?
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. But good point. Like Karen, anyone else like take on that challenge of looking around going, who do I admire? What men do I really admire? Um, I know I definitely always had some men that I admired, and they kind of like were outliers from my overall generalization of men. Um, yeah, but what did everyone else experience this week of playing around with this information? Anyone else want to share? Just go ahead and let yourself off mute. Hopefully you can.
I wouldn't say my experience of remembering back has been good this week because my father was a narcissist. And so it's been interesting trying to think because he definitely was a king in the sense that he created his kingdom. But everything, this again is about healthy men. And so the question is, well, when you're not a healthy man, then what? Because was your life turn the corner at some point because your mother didn't treat them? I don't know, but it's just like, well, what happens with this narcissistic and what happens when the man is not healthy? Then how do you, I don't know. So I'm just thinking personally with my father.
Okay, amazing. I love that you brought that up because I think that no matter what, men will go through the phases. So whether he's uh unhealthy or healthy, he's going to go through the phases. It's just our decision of how we want to interact with them. The the stuff that we talk about of how to interact with men, we're in general talking about how to interact with healthy men. Now, does this work with narcissists, with other people that aren't totally, like what human is 100% whole and complete and healthy? I mean, we're all whole and complete, but we all have our own issues, right? And there's some men that have more issues than others. And so the question isn't so much of whether the men have gone through these phases as much as how we want to interact with them, how we want to respond to them. So if your dad was still around, then deciding how you want to interact with them. But this also brings up another point that I just want to touch on, because I was talking with Judy earlier, and I love kind of geeking out on this stuff with her, but she was talking about how she had a programming as a child that was really healthy around men. And a lot of people don't have that, right? And so we have a certain programming and subconscious programming. And so it's interesting to just look at the programming that you have. Is it a healthy one? Were you raised to honor and respect men, or were you raised to see them as, as damaged in some way, or wrong in so many ways? So
Or to bow down to them.
or to bow down to them. Yeah. So there's healthy ways that we were taught. I know that my programming was like partly really healthy and part not healthy, right? So we get to just look at it, and again, the process for transformation is you recognize what fundamental beliefs you have, and whether they're ones that you want to hold on to or ones that you want to let go of, and then release the ones that you want to let go of. So go, recognize, oh, like I like how my mother was really respectful of my father. I don't like how she like bowed down or like let go of her own needs for my father, right? So there's certain things that we want to acknowledge that we want to let go of or not, and then we let go of it. And then the important thing is to replace it. So there's a lot of processes for releasing all sorts of belief systems and everything else. And there's a lot of things that we can replace. But the nice thing about Allison's work is it gives you a lot of information to consciously replace the stuff that you're willing to let go of. So a little bit of a tangent there, but it's really important. And I love that you brought that up, Lori. Did that kind of answer your question there? Okay, I see you nodding. Great. Okay, so we have so much to go over this week. It's so good. The tunnel, the idea of the tunnel. And so last week we talked about the prince and the knight and the 3 phases of the prince stage. And then at the end of the prince stage, they go into this descent into darkness, is this chapter that we're going over today. And then when they come out of it, we go into the chapter about kings. And so, yeah, Nancy, go ahead. She has a comment, and I'm going to make Brooke the...
I had a question, Paige. As I read this, I just thought, what about men that have done a lot of work on themselves and gone to a lot of, self-help groups and all that, or done a lot of medicine work or something? Do they all go through these stages? Or are they a little more conscious of what they're doing to the people around them and stuff as they go through this stuff? Or are they just driven like they can't see that their wife wants more time with them or whatever?
Well, I think that's a super good question. It makes me think of like women's cycles, right? Like it's you can either just be driven like a teenage girl that's just like when she gets her period, like she's not going to be as conscious of what's going on. And actually, the more conscious we become, in fact, one of my good friends is doing a course on like following your cycle intuitively and running your business and doing all these things with it. And so if you're interested in that, just comment in the chat, because it's a really good course that's actually tonight at 7. So if you want to do that, but it's Maya Rose. But I think that like just like that, men are going to go through the cycle. A woman's not going to not go through her cycle because she's enlightened or something. Like she's going to have the cycle. So men are going to go through their cycles, but there's really positive attributes. And so I like to see it kind of like the Enneagram. Like there's the integration and there's a disintegration in every personality type. But in this, there's an integration of like the highest way for a knight to show up is really valiant and really like brave and taking on new challenges and reaching new heights in his life and trying new things. Like there's really cool things about being a knight, and there's really neat things about being a prince. Like they create and they build things, like those are the ones that built cathedrals, and they built, like they have visions of what they want, and it's really beautiful. So it's not that if you're more in, like, you're not going to go through the phases, it's just you're going to show up in the very best way if you do the work on yourself, or you're more conscious, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
great question though. We all get to kind of choose the conscious level, and this is the work, is overcoming the natural instinctual way of being. We instinctually act a certain way, and our brains lie to us all the time. Like my sister and I were talking about this week. Like there are full on lies going on in our heads. Like she was saying, she may be hitting menopause or something, but sometimes in the month she'll be like, I want another baby. And then she'll be like, that is the worst idea I think I've ever thought of, right? Like this is not a true thought, but it's an instinctual thought, because it's just the way that her hormones and her brain and her body, that's what instinct is saying. Like have another baby before you can't anymore, right? But that's not actually a true state. So yeah, I'll definitely send that link over, Christina. So I'll send it during the breakouts so I don't have to multitask. Kira, go ahead.
Because I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
So when she mentions the death of a father, Peter, my husband, lost his father. Oh goodness, it was probably like almost 5 years ago. And I'm curious, like their relationship wasn't super healthy. And I don't know, looking back, I'm like, oh, I don't know if his dad was really, he was like the age where you could be a king, but he like was not really in a good place. Like it wasn't like he had built a kingdom that he was proud of, I guess. Like how does that work? Does it, like death of a father, always start that process, do you think? Or like could it be, I mean, I was also thinking about the death of our son when he was 2, and I'm like, okay, well, do these things, is that like a guarantee, or is that just kind of like you still have to wait that time period for late princehood to happen and then tunnel?
Well, I would say, first of all, for you to just talk to him about it and be like, do you think that that sped up your entryway into the tunnel? And so it may have. And yeah, one of the catalysts to almost like to start to put a man into the tunnel can be the death of a child or a father. The father figure idea is that there's kind of a void, like so it would be more like if he was a king and he had a kingdom and he had a business, and Peter was going to be the one to take over. He'll get through the tunnel a lot. Like the tunnel may be mourn father, get out and run the business, right?
Gotcha.
And now I own the empire. So that's the idea of how it can be a catalyst, but it does not mean that every man that has his father die is going to go into the tunnel and then come out a king. Do you know what I mean? And also,
Gotcha.
another great point that this brings up is that some men never get out of a tunnel, and some men go into a tunnel and then go back into prince. So it's
Okay.
not a guarantee that you go into the tunnel and rise up into king, because in order to become a king, there has to be this declaration of I am. Like this is who I am in the world, and no matter what the consequences, that's who I am claiming my stake in this world to be. And so when you're around a king, you feel it in your body, like there's a solid feeling and structure to their beingness when you're around a king, and in their like, yeah, I just don't do that kind of thing. Like they're just, that's their answer when they just know who they are, and they just go, no, that's not my thing. That's not who I am, you know? And in unhealthy ways, a king isn't necessarily healthy or unhealthy. A king is just, I am who I am, and I'm going to be that in the world. Like gangsters are, there's a lot of kings in the gangster world, right? He's the guy that like owns his stake in the world.
The one thing I wanted to contribute was we have a lot of different decades with all of the ladies that are here, and sometimes what decade you're looking at, you know, from what perspective. What's gone on with men and women that started in the 60s is much different than somebody who was parented in the 50s. You know, so it's like, it's not just the stages, because when I grew up, the stages could go, I think, a little bit more fluid
Totally.
than they can today, given all of the things from the 60s, 70s, you know, so forth on down. So as we're looking at it, then being aware of where we've been as women, or what we've been exposed to as women. I remember I was in a healing seminar, and all of a sudden the women were going off on the men, and there were 3 men in the seminar, you know, in the group. It was a healing group. And I finally had just kind of had it. And it was like, I am a medical family, and I have sons and grandsons, and I'm really tired of the man bashing, right? And I think we have to be accountable and responsible when we've fallen prey to the man bashing or the woman bashing or the this bashing or that bashing, so that we actually get awake and aware of what program we're running, and is it one we want to continue. So just that little observation.
Thank you so much. It's a lot of the recognizing and then knowing how to replace it, right? Like you can say, oh yeah, I'm not going to man bash. But when everyone's around and you don't have anything else to contribute except like, yeah, I kind of agree with that, you know, then it's tricky. So this is really powerful to have new information to go, you know, like maybe this is a new, different perspective that you can look at. And I love your point that as in the 50s, the timeline for the progression of men was very clear for men. And even now you'll see a lot of men in their 30s that haven't even hit middle prince yet, because they haven't gotten married and they haven't started having kids, and they haven't, so they're used to, and for hundreds and hundreds of years, there was a pretty clear delineation of what a man does, and the process kind of was naturally in it. And so also another thought is, I don't think that an emasculated man can really turn into a king, right? So if there's all this emasculation going on, then for a man to even come out of knighthood is really difficult. It's really hard to see a king if you're just, you can't even see yourself becoming a king because you're so emasculated, or there's no real need for you in your world to step into that. So just some thoughts, and I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on that, but that's kind of what comes to me. So Carmen, I'd love to hear, oh, and then here we'll go to Nancy and then Carmen. I love all these comments and questions and thoughts.
I just have a quick question, because a lot of the people on here know. I just wondered, Paige, do you think Gerald is a king?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to know what a person was that was definitely a king. Yeah.
Yeah. There's just this feeling of like, this is who I am, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he's not worried about being someone else. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a solid feeling around king. him, right?
That's what it feels like for a king.
Yeah.
Somebody like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So just think in your world, like, this is a great question to ask of like, who are the kings in my life? And what does it feel like to be around them? You know, great question. And something for all of us to think about. Yeah. Carmen.
Okay, I have a comment and a question. And I have no idea which chapters we were supposed to read for this week, so I might be ahead, or I don't know, because also the Audible chapters don't match up with always what we say.
Yeah.
So if what I bring up is another week, just say. So I am having a very hard time with her explanation of the misunderstanding between men and women that she uses to basically dismiss all of sexism. The way she talks about, like, you know, men came back from the war and there was just this like big misunderstanding, and you know, this is how a lot of things went wrong. And it's like, no, like the men wanted to keep their power, and there are many, you know, very like systematic things that have cropped up in our society to, you know, that create real disparities between men and women and make it harder for women to operate. So I found that very trite, her explanation for like, oh, there was this misunderstanding between men and women. I'm not trying to vilify men. I don't think men collectively got together and said, let's keep women down. So I get what she's saying in that, but also I feel like she's very dismissive of a real reality that has happened for decades for women who have tried to operate in a man's world.
Yeah, and I love that you brought this. I was about to say, like, who was triggered?
So triggered.
Yeah, like there's definitely some stuff in here that gets triggering, and that goes like, okay, are we just saying just bow down to men, or like are we saying that we should just let men have all the power without limits, or that women shouldn't have as much power, or women shouldn't have been working, or whatever, right? Like there were a lot of really amazing, wonderful things from women being able to go into the workforce, you know, like we're here today because that happened, right? So most of us have had really fulfilling jobs that we're really glad we got to have and got to do outside of the home. So there are a lot of there's just things in every study of any master teacher that I've ever had that are going to be no for me, right?
Yeah.
And so I just honestly go, yeah, I don't agree with that. But like no one's 100% perfect about everything. And like her teachings for me resonate in a lot of ways. And in some ways I'm just like, that totally doesn't resonate, doesn't fit into my paradigm, and I don't really care to try to make it. Like some of the things it challenges me and I go, whoa, like I like to get that feeling of like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that, because
Yeah,
then
me
I
too.
get to look at it. And for that kind of thing, like you're looking at it and you're discussing it and you're going, what do you think of this? And you're maybe looking at it from a different perspective because it's totally not your perspective. And it's helping you to see something from like a slightly different perspective, but you don't have to totally agree with Allison with everything she says.
No, I know. I just think that that is an interesting conversation in the sense of like, okay, we could call it the great misunderstanding, but like what, how that played out in real ways. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
okay, so that's just one, that was my moment.
And she did kind of say like, there were some really good things that came from it. And her explanation was, yeah, it would have been triggering for a lot of women, I think.
Okay, and then my question is, and maybe she gets to this later, because I'm married to a king, I am curious how kings relate to each other.
Yeah.
Because is it like kingdom, like competition always a little, or is it I don't know. I'm just curious if she touches on that and that's coming, or if that's not. I know a lot, this book is a lot about relating female and male, or feminine, masculine, but I'm just curious about that if anybody has any knowledge around that.
Yeah, and I'd love people to chime in about this. And it comes back to my initial thought with Lori is that there's the integrated king and the disintegrated king. So there's kings that are competitive and want to take out the other kings, and there are kings that want to collaborate and create bigger kingdoms, or to like honor and respect and collaborate with other kings, right? So it for me, the initial thought and my experience of watching kings, like there are kings that want to play with other kings, you know, like they want to play polo, or they want to, like, if you think about kings with their crowns on, like there's been kings of all sorts in the history of the world, and there are still kings of all sorts. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess where that comes from too is even for an integrated king, and this may be a very just personal experience, I have seen my king open up more to like, oh, maybe it would be good to have more male friends or relate to them in a different way than I have in the past. And I didn't know if that was like a common king thing to happen or not.
Yeah,
You can
I
talk on
wonder.
that.
Yeah, I do wonder. And I also think that as they see other kings collaborate, they're like, oh, you can do that, you know, like there
Yeah.
is an element of like, whoo, here I am, and this is who I am, and this is my kingdom, and and then it's like, oh, what's that king doing over there? And like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe I want, so I would think that's it, but I would love to talk to kings and like have a conversation around that as well, and just figure out what they're really thinking once they get to that point. Like, is it a common thing, or is it just a personality thing of like,
Yeah.
I would think that it would be part of the stepping into king, where you're first just like independent, and then you start to look around for collaboration. But I would be curious to study that.
So I just found my homework from the first time that I was introduced to these concepts, and I had a lot of triggers too in the beginning. And like, for example, it says, you know, men, they're manipulative, lazy, not good at communicating, childish. They aren't open with their emotions, understanding. They don't see where they need to change. Anyway, it's so funny that I pulled this out today, because I actually have created this bottom part here where, you know, if I didn't see them misbehaving, what kind of a partnership would I have? And so I feel like now I've drawn
What did it
in.
say? What did it say?
Peace. It says, so what would your relationship with yourself and the opposite sex be like if you didn't see them as misbehaving? Peaceful, joyful partnership, fun, playful, mutually beneficial, reciprocal, loving, and kind. And so since I've been having this new king to practice with, and I've been opening up, it is like I've never experienced anything like this in my life. And he's exactly opposite of all these things, because I feel safe enough to be vulnerable because I'm not seeing him like an asshole. You know what I'm saying?
And
Like,
he's not being treated like one, so he's treating you so beautifully.
yes. And after last week's class, I had a video call, told him about the class, and that I'm going to be practicing some things and ask his feedback. And he's like, oh my God, that's so right. Wow. I wish more women would know this, because I said it was eye-opening for me to realize that men want to help. Like they genuinely want to give. I've never had that experience before. But now I also can look back and see how, oh, I didn't allow them to do that before. You know, I didn't allow men to give to me that way. I was so bad.
Well, because you were protecting yourself, right?
Yeah.
So it's, if you have like all these walls up trying to protect yourself from something or someone that's not safe, then how can they come in and start like pouring gifts on you, you know, or give you or serve you or love on you, you know?
It's so different. And even when you said, I think last week about like when you are vulnerable and open and receptive, then that allows them to, and that creates intimacy, which creates partnership. And if they don't have that, it can't get created. So I've been keeping that in mind, and I've just been totally truthful for the first time, not thinking like, oh, well, maybe if I say that, it's going to seem too that, just all of it out the window. And just been open and vulnerable about how I'm feeling, getting in touch with how I actually feel, like feeling my heart getting warm and saying my heart is feeling warm. And, you know, it's like the response is phenomenal. I'm
It's
so excited to play the game.
yay.
So,
Oh,
thank you. Thank you. Forever grateful.
you're so amazing. It's so neat when you start to apply all this. It works, it works, it works. It's so beautiful. So well done in just doing the work, and like do the worksheets, everyone. Like it's such a perfect example of what can happen. And it's neat to look back on what your responses were now and what they end up being as you keep applying this stuff. But there's so much magic to be had. So thank you, Jody. You're so magical. So he's in the king stage. Yeah, she's like, oh yeah. So let's just go into like, what is a king? And it's in the workbook on page 20. But he's fully realized, unchangeable in sense of self. And I thought this was really important to see, that when a partner evolves into a king, it's crucial for women to adapt. Mistakenly treating him like a prince that he once was, offering support, advice, and independence, fails to acknowledge his transformation. Recognizing and continuously exploring the king's evolved identity is vital. And so this is also a really great part. A king's capacity to give is vast. Partners need to allow and appreciate this generosity and learn to receive in a whole new way. Constant, significant appreciation for who he is, what he provides, and the opportunities he creates is crucial. So this is a beautiful part of the king, being with a king, and also the vulnerability part that Jody, you just brought up, I think is really key for any part of a relationship. And I was just at a conference, like a luncheon, and this speaker was talking about this, but just the vulnerability, like it's to be like, oh, well, he's not vulnerable with me. It really is, as we open up, like as the feminine, we're like the flower that opens and opens and opens. And that vulnerability is a part of the openness so that he can penetrate and so that he can be like fully in his masculine. But as we vulnerably open, they also get to open and they get to be more seen. And they will like learn from us in that vulnerability. And so often I hear women going, you know, like I shared this really vulnerable thing, and then like weeks later or months later, like he's shared something from his childhood that he's never shared with anyone. And he said it was because I had shared that, you know, like, so they are receptive to our openness, and they learn, you know, they may take a bit to see, was that safe? Was that okay? And he's like, yeah, that was totally safe for her to share that with me. And she's safe to share that as well. So just some thoughts on that. So that's the king, and the challenge this week is to really look for kings in your world, and just honor them, respect them, like show validation and appreciation for who they are, and listen to their opinions that they share, because they're going to share some, and really honor that is their, like I said at the beginning, like that's their life's work. That's what they've been working on, figuring out. And by the time they're a king, they're like, this is what I've decided I believe about this. And one kind of note to that is that doesn't mean that they're never going to change their ideas. It's just they have an idea, they have a belief, they have an opinion. And I found that like it takes a little bit to have the conversation and go like, I'm not sure about that, or okay, so I hear you saying that and I want to understand that more, and here's what I think about it. And he's like totally willing to change his opinion if he realizes that he's wrong about it. Right? It's not like, oh, he's never gonna change his opinion. It's just it's gonna be, you're gonna have to give good evidence, right?
Yeah, I find this triggering to have the reminder again to, be open to possibility, like to just be always grateful, always praising. Yes, they have an opinion, stubborn opinion. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll have gratitude. At a certain point, it's like, there's also, and this is always the pushback with this whole program, is like, and what about the women? Like, I feel like I'm in my queen and I would like to be respected too, right? And I have an opinion and I'm stubborn as well. So how is this gonna go? It's not going very well, I'll tell you, but
well, and that's the question, is how's that going for you?
yeah. It's, well, there's both of us are in a place of like, I think it's like a midlife crisis where you have this, or you're just going through the stage of like, oh, I don't want to flex as much anymore. I'd like to be more rigid and just stick with, I guess be true to myself and not flex so much to what he's wanting. And so there's just a balance there that I'm, right? It's like playing back and forth, and where's the balance? Anyway, I don't know if anyone else.
That's so much of the question of this work of life in general, is like, how do we honor ourselves? How do we come more into who we are and get more of what we want, really? Like, I want you guys to get more of what you want faster and easier. That's like my mission in life. Like, I just love helping people to get what they want faster and easier. And I know that a lot of people want better relationships, right? So I found this information, but there's so many different ways of approaching this. And it's honor yourself first or all is lost. That's something that is constantly emphasized in the teachings of Allison and in the work, is like, you have to honor yourself. So as you interact with a king, if I could create a picture for you, you would be crystal clear on what you want, and you would be crystal clear on what you're creating in the world, and you would at least know what you're committed to, and at least know one thing that you want more of, right? Like, I'm just giving you some ideas of like getting clearer and getting into a place of like knowing yourself as much as you can. And we're always evolving, but to know yourself is just the game of life, right? So you get to know yourself and you know what you want, and then you're in partnership with a king, let's say. And you say, hey, like, this is what I want to create, and this is what I honor about you, and this is what I want your opinion on, and this is what I want to know what you think, and this is what I see, and this is what I want to create together, and this is what I want to create alone, and what do you think? And then honoring that, right? Like going into partnership rather than just trying to do it all yourself, like a princess would do, of just like, I'm independent and I can do it myself. And right, it's going like, what if I asked, or what if I like listened and honored and heard him? And if he gives an opinion that just doesn't work for me, that doesn't mean you have to obey him, but it means that like, I want to understand more of why you're saying that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think that kings love to give And if they can, they will. And if they can't, they won't. And if they are praised, then they'll give more. If they're appreciated, like that's the one thing, the kings in my life, like that's literally all they want. Women don't work this way. Like I give and then you give and then we play this game, and it's like this symbiotic relationship that women have. Like I know how many meals I've brought and I know how many, and we just play, we're just a community kind of brain that we all function in. Men give and they expect nothing back except for appreciation and acknowledgement, right? Like that's, they could give and give and give and give in
And sex.
general, in
And
general.
sex.
Sex, appreciation, sex. Yeah. And that's maybe a way, like their love language of feeling appreciated, right? So, like most humans like that, but men really like that as a way of appreciation, right? Good point. That's it, but it's like, what's the harm in just praising them, in complimenting them, and seeing that maybe they feel like they function differently, but if you see it as praising, honoring, respecting them as like fuel into their ability to protect and provide, and if you were willing to do that, if that meant that that could be what is given to you, then maybe that would be worth, even when it's uncomfortable or going like, he doesn't praise me, he doesn't compliment me all day. Like, yeah, that would suck. And what if you just tried it?
I'm just gonna offer one more thing that I really had an aha moment with this week with my counselor. I was just saying I really have a hard time that he's just like, he says no so easily. Like he says no most of the time. And I tend to say yes most of the time. And so it just stuns me every time. He's just so willing to say no. And then she said, well, what no means is that he's not ready to be accountable for that. And then it was like, oh, yeah, that's way easier than that out of the two options, be totally accountable for something I'm not ready to be accountable for, or say no. He's willing to just say no and be, in my mind, the jerk that I was made. But now I know what the no means. It means he wants to be responsible for that. He's waiting until he can say yes, but he can't say yes. So that was just a really great insight.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's super powerful. So the fourth key that I want to hop into, and then I'm going to have you guys break out into your breakout rooms, and I'll put the link to this the course that you can look up if you want to check out that the masterclass that's happening tonight at 7 for women and our cycles and everything. But the fourth key is to adapt their stages and not take things personally. So with all of these stages, it's really easy to be hurt or take things personally or expect things of a man when he's not capable or he's not able to be accountable, right? Just like Brooke shared, like at certain stages of life, if he takes more and more on and says yes to everything, then he's not going to be able to be the honorable man that he wants to be, right? So learning about the stages and then learning how not to take things personally or not to see them as screwing up all the time, can be really liberating. So that's the fourth key. And it says, whenever women treat men like enemies, they have to respond to men like enemies rather than working to give them. They have to respond to women like enemies rather than working to give them what they need and making them happy. Instead, they have to work on protecting themselves from women. And so it's a lose-lose. So as we, like Jody talked about, as she surrendered and stopped treating men like they were enemies and putting walls up, and then that wall's down and he doesn't have to, protect himself from her attacking or making him wrong. And he gets to step into that natural way of being for a healthy man, right? So it can be really beautiful. And so stepping out of the seeing men as messing up and punishing them, sometimes we'll even punish them when we feel like they're not showing up the way they should, then we can have a better experience. And really, it's about having a better experience of ourselves, right? Like, we're not doing this just so that, like, it's all just way better for the men, right? And that's almost codependent, right? I'm doing the work so that he is happier. No, it's so that you're happier. So you're having a better experience for yourself. And it's a win-win. That's the beauty of this work, is like, we're going for win-wins here. And so if you're not winning and it just feels like you're pandering to a guy by praising him and telling him how great he is, and he's all like, yeah, then stop doing it, right? But if you're doing it and it's enhancing your relationship with him and it feels good for you, then keep doing it. That's all. It's super simple. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions as I put you all into breakout rooms? 2 or 3 things that you love about men, that you appreciate about men, that you've experienced in your life that has been beneficial. 2 things that you don't like so much, and 1 thing that you are committing to do that's different. So any questions about this homework? Yes, Carmen.
Okay, so I am Gottman relationship trained, of which you know, Paige, but one of the very big tenets of a healthy relationship is accepting influence, both directions. So I think this is an interesting concept with the Kings, because like you're saying, it's not that they're completely rigid, but I do think that like when I heard, I don't know who was speaking, Brooke was speaking, that can really be an unhealthy part of a relationship if you don't feel you're having reciprocal influence on each other. And like to this point, maybe there's different ways to communicate it, or bring it up, or different times to bring it up. Maybe this is the time to listen and there's another time to bring it up, and like you can work around that. But I just want to acknowledge that, like, I think because we're learning one side of this, it sounds a little one-sided, and that's why we keep getting triggered. But actually, this accepting influence is very important for a healthy relationship, going both ways. And in research, it shows that men take influence from their wives less than women. Like, this is a very big point in their research. So, I think it's healthy for us to work towards that in our relationships, that both are doing that.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And it's so true. Women tend to be more chameleon-like. Like, even the way that we respond to criticism is like instant, like we get criticized, boom, then have 7 layers like that have been broken down of like all the reasons why criticism really doesn't even affect them very much at all. So we are super influenced, and we're more adaptable because that's just how our brains work even. So there's an element of that influence, and with a healthy man and in a healthy relationship, hopefully he respects you so in a way that like he is influenced. So when you do give those the like, you do share your thoughts, and you do model a certain behavior of vulnerability or openness or appreciation, there's a response to it, right? Like, that's a sign of a really healthy relationship. So it's just something to look for. And I love that you brought that up. So thank you, Carmen. And I love when you share your insights from that training, because if you don't know about Gottman, like, it's amazing. And talk to Carmen, because she's really brilliant around that work. So thank you, Carmen. Okay. I'm going to open up the Breha rooms, and really you'll have 10 minutes if you want to hop back on, or if you want to just hop off, then we'll just go until the end of the hour. And yeah, this next week we're wrapping it up. I think it's the last week, is it? So no, we have 2 more. Thank goodness, I was freaking out. Okay, we have 2 more weeks. So I'm gonna just make sure I have the right, we're doing chapters 6 and 7, Color in the Black and White World, and Much to be Thankful for. And it's going to be really good. But this week's homework is all about watching for the kings in your life and working on not taking things personally, like it says in the key number 4, and just looking at when talk to men about the tunnel. It's a really fascinating idea, and I'd love to hear insights next week about what you've figured out about the tunnel. Okay.
And next
Here
week
we
is
go.
Valentine's.
Oh yeah, on the call. We're still gonna do it, you guys, on Valentine's Day. So that you can go into your Valentine's dates like totally with so much so much to talk about on your Valentine's dates. But if you can't make it, we're gonna record it. Don't worry about it. So if the attendance drops a little bit, that's fine, but we are still gonna do it because I think it would be a really cool thing to give you stuff. Okay. Go ahead and jump in.